The night my daughter called me from a frozen porch, I was 49 minutes away with both hands inside a ruptured commercial water line. Lily was 16. She was standing outside in 17-degree F weather wearing a thin Christmas sweater while nearly 40 members of my wife's family ate, drank, and laughed behind a wall of warm glass. Her coat was still inside. She had been sent out because she told her grandfather to stop making fun of me. What none of them knew was that I owned Lakeshore Facility Services, the company paying salaries to dozens of people connected to that family. Last year, Lakeshore brought in $18.7 million. To the Harringtons, I was still Brooks Field Operations' husband with an old Silverado, work boots, and apparently no ambition worth respecting. I had allowed them to believe that for 8 years. Not because I was ashamed. Because my wife asked me to keep the peace. That night, listening to Lily's teeth chatter through the phone, I understood something I should have understood years earlier. The peace had never been mine. And it had just become too expensive. My name is Nolan Pierce. I'm 43 years old. I started Lakeshore Facility Services in 2012 with $24,000, a used Chevy Express van, a contractor's license, and the kind of confidence you only have before you understand how many ways a business can fail. At first, it was just me. Leaking commercial lines. Broken rooftop units. Emergency calls at 2 in the morning. Property managers who remembered your number only when water was coming through a ceiling. I kept going. One contract became 5. 5 became 20. I hired technicians, then dispatchers, then supervisors, then people whose jobs existed because the company had finally become too large for me to personally touch every problem. By the end of last year, Lakeshore had 136 employees and roughly $18.7 million in annual revenue. I was proud of it. Quietly. I never needed strangers to know what I owned. Brooks' family was different. The Harringtons were not truly wealthy. They were something more exhausting. They were obsessed with looking like people who were. Her father, Charles, had spent most of his career in commercial insurance management and developed a worldview where job titles, neighborhoods, clothes, and vehicles somehow revealed a person's moral worth. The first time Brooke took me to meet him, I came straight from a service call. Jeans. Work boots. Dust on one sleeve. My old silver Silverado parked outside with a dent in the rear bumper. Charles looked at the truck through the window, then at me. So what do you do? Before I could answer, Brooks smiled. He manages field operations. Technically, she was not lying. I did manage field operations. I also owned every share of the company those operations belonged to. Charles nodded in the slow, approving way people do when they think they have correctly placed you beneath them. Good honest work. It sounded like a compliment. It wasn't. On the drive home, I asked Brooke why she had answered for me. She stared through the windshield for a few seconds. Dad gets weird about money. Meaning? Status, titles, all of it. Then she reached over and put her hand on mine. Can we just let him think your operations? It'll make everything easier. I should have asked. Easier for who? Instead, I laughed. Sure. We married 9 months later. After the wedding, Brooke brought it up again. Just let me handle my family. I loved her. I thought knowing the truth about myself meant I didn't need other people to know it. That sounded mature at the time. What I did not understand was that silence does not always preserve peace. Sometimes it teaches people exactly how much disrespect you are willing to absorb. And for the next 8 years, the Harringtons learned that lesson from me. 8 years is a long time to let one small lie become architecture. At first, it was just family dinners. Charles would make comments about my truck. Still driving that thing? Or he would ask whether I was ever planning to move into real management. I learned to smile. Pass the potatoes. Change the subject. Brooke would give me a small look afterward that meant thank you for not making this difficult. Then her family started appearing at Lakeshore. Her brother Ethan was first. Brooke told me he had been stuck in a sales job he hated and needed something stable. I interviewed him myself. He was competent enough, so I hired him into procurement. Then came Cole. Then a cousin who needed benefits. Then an uncle between jobs. Then a family friend Charles described as solid. I kept telling myself the same thing. If they can do the work, what does it matter? By year 8, 47 employees at Lakeshore had some direct or indirect Harrington connection. Not all of them were bad hires. Some were excellent. A few had become people I genuinely trusted. That made it easier not to look too closely at the pattern. Charles never knew any of this. At Easter one year, he told me men who spent their lives around boilers and busted pipes usually lacked the ambition for leadership. I was sitting across from him knowing his son's salary came from a company I had built from nothing. I said nothing. Margaret once offered to help me buy a proper suit for a charity dinner. I handed the envelope back unopened. Thank you, but I'm good. Even that embarrassed me more than I admitted. Not because I needed the money. Because I had allowed these people to think generosity flowed only one direction. The truth is, I was not protecting Brooke anymore. I was protecting the version of our marriage where conflict could always be avoided if I absorbed enough of it. And while I was doing that, family boundaries quietly crossed into company boundaries. Recommendations became assumptions. Assumptions became access. Access became normal. I kept calling my silence patience because that sounded better than what it actually was. Fear of disrupting the peace. Christmas Eve was the first time I understood the cost. For 8 years, I thought I was the only one paying for that silence. Then Lily called me from the porch. Christmas Eve started with a broken main line. At 7:46 p.m., one of our commercial properties on the west side lost pressure across an entire building. Marco Alvarez, one of my senior technicians, was already there when he called. Main feed, he said, and it's ugly. I was supposed to be at the Harringtons by 8. Brooke and Lily had gone ahead without me. I called Brooke from the truck. I'm going to be late. There was a pause. How late? 45 minutes, maybe an hour. She sighed. Of course she did. It's Christmas Eve, Nolan. I know what day it is. Everyone's already here. I'll come when the building has water again. Another pause. Fine. She hung up. By 8:40, I was kneeling beside Marco with one sleeve wet past the elbow, trying to isolate the damaged section without shutting down the entire property. My phone vibrated against the concrete. I almost ignored it. Then I saw Lily's name. I answered. Hey, kiddo. All I heard at first was wind. Then breathing. Fast, uneven breathing. Dad. I stood up. What happened? Can you come get me? Her voice cracked on the last word. Every part of me changed at once. Where are you? Outside Grandpa's house. I looked at Marco. He was already watching me. Why are you outside? Lily tried to steady herself. Grandpa started making fun of your truck again. I closed my eyes for half a second. What did he say? That you've been driving the same piece of junk forever. That mom should buy you something decent because apparently you never will. That's it. I told him to stop. The wind hit the phone again. I said it wasn't funny anymore. My grip tightened. And he said I was disrespecting him in his own house. Her breathing hitched. Then he opened the door and told me I could come back in when I was ready to apologize. I looked at the temperature on my phone. 17 F. What are you wearing? My Christmas sweater. Where's your coat? Inside. For a second, I could not speak. Where is your mother? That silence lasted maybe 2 seconds. It felt longer. She knows. What did she say? Another pause. She said if I just apologized, this could be over. Something inside me went completely still. Not explosive. Not hot. Just precise. Lily, listen to me. Okay. Stay on the covered part of the porch. Don't walk down the driveway. Keep your hands under your arms. Keep moving your feet. I'm coming. Dad. You did nothing wrong. Marco had already picked up his tools. I've got this, he said. You sure? Go. I did. The drive should have taken just under 50 minutes. I drove faster than usual, but not stupidly. Lily needed me to arrive. Not become another emergency on an icy road. I called her twice on the way. Both times she answered. Both times she told me she was okay. Both times I could hear her teeth clicking when she tried to talk. When I finally turned onto the Harrington Street, every house looked staged for a Christmas commercial. White lights. Wreaths. Snow piled neatly against driveways. Warm windows. Then I saw Lily. She was standing at the far end of the porch with her arms wrapped around herself. Her backpack sat by her feet. For one terrible second, she looked younger than 16. I parked crooked and got out before the engine had fully settled. She came toward me. I took off my coat and wrapped it around her. Her hands were ice cold. How long? She looked down. Maybe 45 minutes. I pulled her against me. Over her shoulder, through the front window, I could see Charles laughing beside the fireplace. Margaret was carrying a serving dish. And Brooke stood near the dining room entrance with a champagne glass in her hand. Warm. Dry. Inside. She turned toward the window. Saw me. And froze. That was the moment I stopped wondering whether this could still be explained away. Brooke opened the front door before I reached it. Nolan, don't make a scene. I looked past her into the house. Nearly 40 people. Music still playing. Plates still on the table. Charles standing near the fireplace with a drink in his hand. I'm getting Lily's coat. Brooke stepped aside, but only barely. I walked in. The room went quiet in pieces. First the people closest to the door, then the rest as they realized who had arrived. Lily's coat was draped over a dining chair. I picked it up. That should have been the end of it. Then Brooke said my name. There was something in her voice I had never heard before. Prepared. When I turned around, she was holding a thick manila envelope. She walked toward me and pressed it into my chest. You've embarrassed me for long enough. I looked down at the envelope, then back at her. What is this? You know what it is. I didn't. Not until she said it. Divorce papers. Nobody moved. I want you out of the house tomorrow. The folder felt heavier after that. Not because of the paper. Because of how long it must have taken to prepare. Charles stepped forward. Well. He smiled. Probably the smartest decision Brooks made in years. A couple of people laughed nervously. Then he looked toward the open door. Toward Lily. Maybe now she can stop defending a man who can't even replace his own truck. I stared at him. 8 years of comments. 8 years of Brooke asking me to let things go. 8 years of pretending silence was maturity. And now my daughter had spent 45 minutes outside in 17-degree weather because she finally said what I never would. I tucked the divorce papers under my arm. Brooke folded her arms. So. I looked at her. Then at Charles. Then around the room. Some people avoided my eyes. Others looked almost relieved. They thought they were watching Brooke finally get rid of the field operations husband. I nodded once. Then I guess we're done pretending. Brooke frowned. What does that mean? I didn't answer. I handed Lily her coat, took her backpack, and walked back to the Silverado. The entire drive away, nobody in that house knew what I meant. That was fine. For the first time in 8 years, I was not responsible for making them comfortable with the truth. Lily fell asleep about 20 minutes into the drive. I booked a hotel from a red light. Nothing fancy. 2 queen beds, a heating unit that rattled every few minutes, and a desk barely wide enough for my laptop. I tucked Lily into one bed and sat at the desk with Brooke's divorce papers. The petition was thorough. Too thorough for something decided that night. Her attorney was Jeremy Sloan, a family law lawyer who handled high-asset divorces. That told me Brooke had been planning this for a while. The filing asked for temporary possession of the house, division of liquid assets, support, and attorney fees. Then I reached the section describing my income. I read it twice. Senior operations executive employed by a regional facilities company. No company name. No mention of Lakeshore Facility Services. No founder. No ownership. No controlling interest. Just salaried employment. I leaned back in the chair. Brooke had spent 8 years asking me to let her family believe I was an employee. Now that same version of me had somehow made its way into a legal filing. That left 2 possibilities. Either my wife of 8 years truly did not understand what I owned, or she understood it perfectly and wanted the paperwork to tell a different story. The house was described simply as the marital residence, with no mention of Pierce Property Holdings or the fact that I had acquired it before our marriage. I stopped reading like a husband. I started reading like a businessman. Claims. Omissions. Dates. Language. At 11:52 p.m., I opened my laptop. Then I opened the Lakeshore employee directory and searched one word. Harrington. I did not fire anyone that night. I did not even suspend anyone. At 12:06 a.m., I started a preliminary 36-month compliance review of the 47 employees with direct or indirect Harrington connections. Lakeshore already had the systems for it. Fuel cards. Vehicle GPS. Vendor payments. Purchase approvals. Expense reports. Invoice histories. I was not inventing an investigation because I was angry. I was finally looking closely at something I had spent years choosing not to examine. The first clean file appeared almost immediately. Then another. By 1:20, I had separated 23 employees with nothing unusual in their records. That mattered. Being related to Brooke was not evidence of anything. By the time the review finished compiling, 33 of the 47 were clean. 14 required a closer look. Ethan Harrington's file was one of them. Procurement supervisor. Company fuel and fleet activity showed roughly $36,800 in unexplained discrepancies over 20 months. Weekend fuel charges. Company vehicles appearing far outside assigned service areas. Hotel transactions during periods when no Lakeshore travel had been approved. That was not proof of theft. It was enough to ask questions. Cole's file was worse. His vendor processing history showed repeated invoice sequences tied to 2 small suppliers. Same amounts. Nearly identical descriptions. Invoice numbers changed by 1 or 2 digits. Estimated duplicate payment exposure. $68,900. Again, not a conviction. A flag. Then Charles's name appeared. He was not an employee. But several expense reports submitted through Ethan and Cole listed him as part of client entertainment. Restaurants. Golf. A resort weekend. The client notes attached to those expenses were either vague or non-existent. I read every flagged file twice. I labeled nothing fraud. I accused nobody. At 3:11 a.m., I saved the review to Lakeshore's encrypted server, restricted modification permissions, and preserved the underlying records. Lily was asleep 6 feet away. The hotel heater clicked on. I sat there staring at 14 names. For 8 years, I had told myself family and business were separate. The screen in front of me said otherwise. What Christmas Eve had changed was not the evidence. The evidence had already been there. Christmas Eve only made me willing to look at it. I called Mason Klein at 3:37 a.m. He had been Lakeshore's corporate attorney for almost 9 years and had the unnerving ability to make catastrophe sound like a scheduling problem. He answered on the second ring. Nolan. I need 20 minutes. Go. I told him everything. Lily on the porch. The divorce papers. The wording in Brooke's petition. The 47 Harrington-connected employees. The 14 flagged files. When I finished, Mason was quiet. Then he said, "You're angry." "Yes." "Good." I waited. "Now keep it out of the paperwork." That landed. He walked me through the next steps. First, preserve everything. No deleting. No editing. No calling Ethan or Cole demanding explanations at 4 in the morning. Anyone with access to sensitive financial systems could have permissions restricted while HR reviewed the findings. Administrative leave where necessary. Paid. Documented. Second, Mason would bring in Priya Shah, a CPA and certified fraud examiner, to independently validate the audit. If your numbers are right, she'll confirm them, he said. If they're wrong, you want to know before you accuse anybody. Third, Andre Lewis from HR would handle employee process. Not me. No family-wide purge. No punishment because someone shared Brooks' last name. And the house? I asked. Pierce Property Holdings gives you a strong separate property argument because you acquired it before the marriage. So she can't just call it hers. She can call it whatever she wants in a petition. I heard papers moving on his end. But you are not changing locks, shutting off utilities, or sending anybody a homemade eviction notice. Family court handles possession. I leaned back. I wasn't planning to. You're planning a lot of things tonight. He knew me too well. Mason continued. You have legitimate issues. Don't contaminate them because one dramatic morning would feel satisfying. I looked across the room at Lily asleep under a hotel blanket. What I want is for this to stop. Then do it clean. A pause. Justice, Nolan, not theater. By 4:05 a.m., I had stopped thinking about what I could do to the Harringtons. I was thinking about what I could prove. I slept for maybe 2 hours. By 8:25 the next morning, I was at Lakeshore headquarters wearing the Navy suit I kept in my office for lender meetings and presentations. Andre Lewis was already there. Mason was on speaker. Priya Shah had begun reviewing the preserved audit files before sunrise. The first HR actions were deliberately boring. That was the point. System access was restricted for employees whose roles touched vendor payments, fuel cards, fleet records, or purchasing approvals. Ethan and Cole were placed on paid administrative leave pending independent review. Nobody was called a thief. Nobody was fired because of Christmas. Every notice said exactly what it needed to say and nothing more. At 9:14 a.m., my phone rang. Charles Harrington. I stared at the name for one ring. Then answered. Nolan. His voice came out warm and aggressive at the same time. Something is wrong over at Lakeshore. I said nothing. Ethan's access has been shut off. Cole got some ridiculous HR notice. Apparently, several other people are being questioned. Still nothing. Charles continued. I don't know who your people have running that place, but this needs to get fixed before it turns into a bigger embarrassment. My people. You know what I mean. I leaned back in my chair. What exactly do you want, Charles? I want the number for whoever you report to. That almost made me smile. Almost. Why? Because clearly your HR department has lost its mind, and I'm not going to have half my family treated like criminals because some field manager has a personal issue after Christmas. There it was. 8 years condensed into one sentence. I looked through the glass wall of my office at Andre reviewing the next set of access restrictions. Then I said, You already have the right number. Silence. What? You asked for the person I report to. Another pause. Charles, I founded Lakeshore Facility Services in 2012. Nothing. I am the sole shareholder. His breathing changed. I am also the chief executive officer. For several seconds, the line was completely quiet. Then, that's not possible. It is. Brooke said you ran field operations. I do. You work there. I do that too. His voice dropped. Nolan, what the hell is going on? A 36-month compliance review identified 14 files requiring additional investigation. Because of what happened last night. No. I kept my voice flat. The records existed before last night. Ethan and Cole are family. They're employees. We can handle this privately. No. Nolan. Priya Shah, an independent CPA and certified fraud examiner, is reviewing the financial records. HR is handling employment status. Mason Klein is handling legal exposure. I paused. If the evidence clears someone, they stay clear. If it doesn't, the process continues. Charles sounded almost offended by the word process. And Brooke? Anything involving Brooke goes through counsel. What about the house? Family court. His voice sharpened. You're really going to do this to your wife's family? I looked at the stack of preserved records on my desk. No, Charles. I said it slowly. I'm going to find out what people did. That ended the conversation. He tried to say my name again. I hung up. My phone began lighting up before I could set it down. Brooke. Margaret. Ethan. Numbers I recognized from family gatherings. Numbers I didn't. Texts arrived faster than I could read them. Call me. What is happening? We need to talk as a family. You lied to everyone. That last one stayed on the screen for a second. Then another notification appeared beneath it. Unknown number. The message had been sent earlier that morning. Before Charles called. Before anyone knew I owned Lakeshore. I opened it. I know what Brooke was doing before the divorce papers. She knows exactly what you own. If you want the truth, we need to talk. Asterisk asterisk. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Mason. Because apparently Christmas Eve had not been the beginning of anything. It had only been the night I finally noticed how long the ending had been underway. I forwarded the message to Mason without replying. He called me 12 minutes later. Don't contact the number yet. I wasn't planning to. Good. Let me find out who it belongs to. 48 minutes later, he called again. Her name was Dana Brooks. 45 years old. An independent financial document preparation contractor who had worked directly with Brooke beginning in October 2024. 14 months before Christmas Eve. Not Brooke's lawyer. Not an employee of Jeremy Sloan's firm. Brooke had hired her privately to organize property schedules, business records, ownership documents, account statements, and valuation material before meeting with divorce counsel. Mason arranged the call. Dana answered immediately. Mr. Pierce. Yes. I'm not asking you for money. I didn't think you were. She exhaled. I should have contacted you earlier. Then she told me what Brooke had been doing. For months, Brooke had given Dana corporate filings from Lakeshore. Ownership records. Property documents. Insurance schedules. estimated company valuations. She knew exactly what I owned. Not approximately. Not because she overheard something. She had assembled the documents herself. Dana said Brooke repeatedly asked her to prepare financial summaries describing me as primarily a salaried operating executive of a regional facilities company. I stared at the wall of my office. That's almost the exact language in the divorce petition. I know, Dana said. That was why she had contacted me. She had refused to certify the summary because Lakeshore's corporate documents showed something completely different. Founder. Sole shareholder. Controlling owner. Dana told Brooke the description was misleading. Brooke's response had been that it was only for preliminary financial presentation and could be clarified later if necessary. Dana still refused. Their working relationship ended shortly afterward. Do you have the records? I asked. Yes. Don't send them to me. There was a pause. Send everything to Mason Klein. I can do that. After the call ended, I sat alone in my office. For 8 years, Brooke had told me the secret was about protecting our marriage from her father's obsession with status. Let him believe your operations. Let me handle my family. Don't make things difficult. But 14 months before she handed me divorce papers on Christmas Eve, she had already gathered enough documentation to know Lakeshore's ownership structure better than most people in my company. She knew. She had always known. And while Charles mocked my truck, my clothes, my work, Brooke had sat beside him and let the lie continue. Not because she was confused. Because the version of me everyone believed was useful to her. That realization hurt more than the divorce papers. Christmas Eve had not ended my marriage. It was simply the night Brooke finally stopped pretending the marriage she had been dismantling for 14 months was still intact. And for the first time, I wondered whether the secret I had kept to protect her had eventually become the thing she used to protect herself. Dana sent everything to Mason. Mason sent it to Priya Shah. For the next 6 days, Priya worked through the records Brooke had assembled, our joint accounts, property documents, and the transfers Dana had flagged. Her report was 41 pages. I read the summary first. Over the previous 17 months, Brooke had moved approximately $327 per hundred out of our joint savings. Not all at once. Not in some dramatic withdrawal that would have been impossible to miss. The transfers were scattered. Different amounts. Different dates. Different descriptions. Household reserve. Estimated taxes. School expenses. Family contingency. The money first moved into a high-yield savings account in Brooke's name. From there, most of it went into a brokerage account opened under her maiden name. Harrington. I called Priya. So she was hiding it. Priya did not take the bait. Forensic accounting doesn't decide intent, she said. The pattern and timing are consistent with concealment or dissipation of marital assets in anticipation of divorce. That was why Mason trusted her. She described evidence. Courts decided what it meant. The timing was what bothered me most. The transfers accelerated around the same period Brooke began collecting Lakeshore ownership records. Mason filed an amended response to the divorce petition. Attached were Priya's report, Dana's records and sworn statement, Lakeshore ownership documents, and the preliminary compliance findings. 3 days later, Jeremy Sloan withdrew from Brooke's case. Mason refused to speculate about why. So don't, he told me. Brooke retained new counsel. Marissa Cole. Sharp. Direct. No theatrics. Her first conversation with Mason lasted less than 20 minutes. The opening sentence was, "My client is prepared to discuss settlement." I sat in my office after Mason told me and looked at the original divorce petition again. For months, Brooke had tried to control the story on paper. Now the paper was controlling her. The Lakeshore investigation finished in February. Priya's independent review confirmed enough evidence in Ethan's and Cole's files for Mason to make formal referrals. Ethan's fuel and fleet discrepancies were not random accounting errors. Cole's duplicate invoices were not harmless clerical mistakes. Both showed documented patterns. Andre completed the HR process. Both men were terminated. What happened after that belonged to investigators and attorneys, not to me. The more important decision involved everyone else. Of the 47 Harrington-connected employees, 33 had clean records. They kept their jobs. Several of the 14 originally flagged files were cleared after deeper review. Others resulted in smaller corrective actions where policy had been violated but fraud was not supported. A few reporting lines were changed to remove family-related conflicts. Andre looked at me after we finalized the list. "You're sure?" "Yes." "Even after Christmas?" I understood what he meant. Especially after Christmas. Charles had spent 8 years judging me by my truck, my boots, and the job he thought I had. I was not going to repeat the same mistake in reverse. A surname was not evidence. Being Brooke's cousin was not misconduct. Conduct was. That distinction made the ending less satisfying than firing everyone. It also made it right. The divorce settled in March. I am not going to list numbers. Brooke received what the law entitled her to. She did not receive the outcome she had spent 14 months trying to engineer through incomplete disclosures and hidden transfers. The house and financial issues were handled through counsel and family court. No dramatic eviction. No victory speech. Just documents, negotiations, and consequences. By then, Lily and I were already living in a rented townhouse. At 16, her preference mattered, and the parenting agreement reflected it. She lived primarily with me. One afternoon, we went back so she could collect more of her things. She came downstairs carrying a cardboard box filled with books. "That all you want?" I asked. She looked toward the hallway. Her old room was still upstairs. Clothes. Furniture. Years of things. Then she looked back at the box. "My books." "Anything else?" She thought about it. "No." That answer stayed with me. After everything adults had spent months fighting over, my daughter knew exactly what mattered to her. A box of books. A quiet room at my place. And a home where nobody would ever make her stand outside to earn her way back in. Charles called me one more time. March 8th. Late morning. I had already blocked his personal number, so I do not know what phone he used. He left a voicemail. I listened once. "Nolan, I want to apologize." His voice sounded different. Older. Less certain. "I didn't realize about Lakeshore. I didn't understand who you really were." That sentence stopped me. Because even now, after everything, Charles still thought the important discovery was my title. He thought the problem was that he had mistaken an owner for an employee. It wasn't. He mocked my truck because he believed old men inferior. He mocked my work because he believed dirty hands meant low status. He spoke down to me because, in his mind, a man who worked around pipes, equipment, and service calls belonged somewhere beneath him. Then he found out I owned the company. Suddenly, I was worthy of an apology. That was not understanding. It was recalculation. The truth was simpler. Charles had not been wrong because he thought I was poor. He had been wrong because he thought poor people deserved less respect. My money did not make his behavior cruel. It only made the consequences reach him. He went on to apologize for what happened to Lily. I believed he regretted it. But regret and understanding are not the same thing. I did not call back. I did not send him a speech. I did not explain the lesson. For 8 years, I had spent too much energy hoping the Harringtons would eventually see me correctly. By March, I no longer needed that. I saved the voicemail. Not because I treasured the apology. Because it reminded me of the moment I stopped confusing status with respect. 7 months after Christmas Eve, Lily finished her sophomore year with a 3.8 GPA. That summer, she got a part-time job with a landscaping crew. Her choice. Not Lakeshore. She came home after her first week with dirt under her fingernails, a red line across the back of her neck from the sun, and absolutely no interest in complaining. Hard day? I asked. Very. You going back tomorrow? She looked at me like the question was ridiculous. Obviously. I laughed. We had dinner together at least twice a week, no matter how ugly my schedule became. The townhouse was smaller than the house Brooke and I had fought over on paper. Lily and I talked more honestly there than we ever had in the bigger place. Lakeshore had its strongest quarter in company history. We had roughly $15.2 million in potential contracts moving through the pipeline. And I still drove the same silver Silverado. A few weeks ago, I took it to a meeting with a commercial property group considering Lakeshore for a major multi-site contract. Their CEO was waiting in the parking lot when I climbed out. He looked at the dent in the rear bumper. Then at me. That thing's still running. Every morning. He smiled. 2 hours later, we signed the deal. Driving home, I thought about Charles spending 8 years using that truck as proof that I was somehow less than him. The strange thing was, nothing about me changed when the Harringtons finally learned what I owned. Only their behavior did. I could replace the Silverado tomorrow. I could fix the bumper in an afternoon. I keep meaning to. But every time I see that dent, I remember what took me 8 years to understand. There is a difference between not needing someone's approval and allowing their disrespect to become normal. Lily taught me that on a porch in 17-degree weather. So maybe I'll fix the bumper. Maybe I won't. Either way, the truck still runs. And so do we.